Welcome to the Pregnancy Help Podcast. This is a special Father's Day episode, so we only have men on board this go around. So with me is going to be Josh Cheresnick. Now, Josh is a newer team member for Heartbeat International. He's actually on our Next Level Center Management Solutions team, doing a great job. But he has a tremendous amount of experience working in the pregnancy center, involved as a volunteer, being married to someone who worked full time in the pregnancy center. Is also, by the way, on our staff in a different role, Michelle. So we're grateful for Josh joining us. And we have Nyles. Nyles Pinckney is the men's healing coordinator who's with Support After Abortion. So it's a great opportunity really to talk fathers. This is one of those areas that in the pregnancy help world doesn't get as much traction as maybe it should. And I know that has actually been changing over time and that more and more people are looking into that. But we want to take a moment this Father's Day special to really talk about dads and talk about some of the hidden issues that we're dealing with. Let me start first with my own experience being involved with an unplanned pregnancy. And my personal experience was one where I got my girlfriend pregnant, and unfortunately, I facilitated that abortion. And so this is something that has been a part of my past. It's something that God utilized for me to really transition from being pro-choice or pro-abortion, I would say, by action, to being a fully committed and convicted pro-life champion. It was a very important moment in my life when I realized my own culpability and also the nature of this issue. So it's something that's touched me personally. I've had that experience. I've understood it. I know that it has deep spiritual roots. But I really want to talk about a couple things. I want to talk about men as they are part of the process of finding out that there is an unplanned pregnancy. Let's start with you, Josh. Let's talk about that moment of encountering those two lines that say she's pregnant. Maybe that's how she relays it. Put us in the shoes of that person that's experiencing that, Josh.
So when I first started, I would meet with men at the pregnancy test, and I would see a lot of them were scared. What's running through their brain as they get that, oh, I'm going to be a dad. And hearing that can be scary, because then you start thinking of, how am I going to afford it? Am I ready? I don't, what is it to be a dad? I don't know. How do I do these things? How do I swaddle? How do I put a diaper on? All those things that I don't know, I'm all of a sudden scared about, and I'm trying to think, and it's going through your head at 1,000 miles an hour that, hey, guess what? Now I'm a dad, and now I have a child, and I don't know anything. So how do I do this? And I saw a lot of men in that situation trying to figure out where they fit and how they fit in, because they just don't know.
I feel like in that moment, the man is supposed to have all the answers, right? That's not what they want to have. They want to be strong in that moment. They want to be in control, have a clear-eyed understanding. But often, you're exactly right. They're just facing that moment with fear and with challenges. And that's one of the reasons why it's important really to understand his opportunity in this moment. And as we step into that, Nyles, we look at we really see the man struggling in that and struggling what to do and how to really respond. And so there's a posture that kind of the culture tells him to take towards the woman. Can you speak to that?
For me, before Father's Day, when my son was born, before my abortion experience, that was something a little bit different about mine. So Father's Day for me was a joyful experience. I'm growing up. I'm a young father. I'm experiencing this with my son. But then that changed after my abortion experience, because it became one of those things of, okay, I'm grateful because I'm my son here. I'm going to celebrate him, my dad, and these things and certain things. But then I don't feel like much of a father because of my abortion experience and the decision that was made. So it was one of those things on the shadows, everyone's smiling, but in the back of my mind, I just can never really sit there and enjoy these moments as much as I really would like to. And I think some men will have those reactions, and some men may not understand why they react in these ways. So sometimes it can come out as anger, or sometimes it can come out as irritability. because men, those are the emotions we're comfortable with expressing a lot of the times, because those are the ones we're taught at a young age, instead of, hey, let's talk about our feelings and emotions and why I'm sad. I don't think my dad has ever once told me, hey, let's talk about why you're sad. Can't even remember him even saying the word sad. So I think that's a lot of things that men are dealing with as well.
Overall, our culture really does approach the fathers in a different way. I mean, we can really even see this in the reality of the celebration of Mother's Day versus Father's Day. Like I just did some quick research and learned that we actually spend about $8 billion more on Mother's Day as a nation. This is the 2023 numbers, according to the National Retail Federation. We spent $8 billion more. Um, it's a huge, actually, it's $18 billion more. It's a huge disparity on how we focus. There are 40 million fewer Father's Day cards are sold each year than Mother's Day. And it's like, okay, so we sometimes are kind of setting the father aside partly because he's not really encouraged to convey what he's thinking. He's not, and sometimes he's not able to, like you said, Nyles, he's not able to convey what he's thinking because he is in that place of trying to wrestle with these things that he's feeling. But many of the men's experiences really in pregnancy decisions have remained invisible even away from the pregnancy center. And I would say like in church spaces or the culture at large. Josh, from a pastoral perspective, you've seen this outside the pregnancy center as well.
Yeah, as a pastor, it's one of those areas that a lot of pastors never touch on in the church. They never talk about certain things, and abortion and men really hardly ever come up, and that is a shame. And it's something where we don't give the tools to young men how to process things correctly in their life, and so they feel lost and they drift away because they feel like no one else has ever dealt with it. So we did do some things in our church, and there were some other churches that were doing some programs, but it was really hard to find anything consistent for young men to learn how to deal with their emotions and how to deal with especially feeling alone and isolated after an abortion decision.
Well, I would say that the church is also, at least from my perspective, the church is weak on encouraging men's responsibility, even in the unplanned pregnancy. Like, even kind of before you get to the abortion, if you're going
Mm-hmm.
to do these things, there's a responsibility, and the church could certainly be stronger in that. We can watch whether a man leans in or shuts down during that decision-making window. Like, what do you think is the difference, Josh, on that reality? Will they lean in or will they step away?
A lot of what I've seen and is their upbringing. So young men that come to the center with a father in their life are more willing to stand up and try to make a decision. Those who have no idea or don't have a father in their life, it is harder for them because they don't know what to expect. And we've seen that on both sides for young men and young women, but especially for young men, if they don't have a father that they can look at and see, they will stay silent. They will fall back on what society tells them, which is they don't really have a voice in this or a matter in this decision. You've done something wrong. There's been no support for them up until that point.
Kind of going along with what I mentioned a little bit earlier, is something that starts earlier in your childhood. I think that's something a lot of ways conversations approached as men or young men or even boys. Okay, when you're having something and you're playing a sport growing up, when you have a bad practice or something like that, how have you seen your father handle it and approach you about it? Had most dads, they're most like, you got to play better. They're that aggressive, like, I in it, dad. Like my dad, I played football. My dad, he wasn't the most into it, but he always gave me that after ride home speech. And it was like, if it was a bad game, he'd let me know. And even if I was sad, it was one of those things of, hey, don't cry about it. You put that away. We put that and perform better the next time. And at times, I think that can go to men as well, because when they go through their abortion experience, because when some men that experience their first abortion experience after that, they're like, I felt terrible. You know what? I'm not even going to let anyone know about this, but I'm going to keep this to myself as a learning moment. Like my dad used to say, I'm going to put it away. So when the next time steps up for me to be a father, or steps up when my partner tells me she's pregnant, I won't even have to use this moment hopefully I can push it so far away I forget about it. I forgot this bad
Mm.
game. I forgot this bad play. Because that's me speaking in sports terms, because a lot of times men growing up, that's something they're used to. Or when you're going fishing, you can't catch, you have a bad day of fishing. You don't catch anything on your line with your dad. And he's like, hey, well, there's more fishing to see. And I know we've heard that saying in many different ways, but a lot of times men, we hold on to these sayings and we may think of it as small things that we're younger, but as we grow up, we fall back on our training or we fall back on sayings that stick to us. So even in the hardest situations that we have no idea how we'll get through, we'll be like, what did my father tell me? Or how did he tell me to handle situations like that? So I think a lot of times it becomes generational things where it's not something you share of hardships or things that happen to us. You don't talk about your problems. We just go, you figure out, do the most manliest thing that you've been taught to do. So that's chop wood or go lay bricks. I don't even know how to do these things, but I'm just saying that's some manly things I would think of.
Far as like that compartmentalization, takes a good quarterback to forget the last a bad pass that they threw, that last pick. It takes a golfer that has to forget that shanked shot. I'm not a fisherman, so I would have no idea what you do when you're not successful at the lake. But these are things that men are taught to do. Kind of set these aside, move on, forget them as if they never happened. And unfortunately, that's how men also approach these moments. But also, there's an expectation that they then move on as if they never remember those things, and that's what we know is not true. We know that men do regret abortion, and that they will, in time, begin to wrestle with those things. Maybe not all men, just like it's not necessarily all women, but they will begin to wrestle with that decision in the past. How have you seen them kind of come to that realization and begin to wrestle with that decision that either they were at fault in not doing more or actively pursuing for their girlfriend?
It's first to see how the man responds to certain things in that situation. I think the biggest thing is when he first initially hears of when she says she's pregnant, and you kind of go back to that thought process. And a lot of men, I feel like mostly have the same answer or responsive is, are you sure? Are you sure? I was like, I think she's pretty sure. I think she told you she did her steps. So I think that's one thing that a lot of men, that's one that they go to, is feeling that space of, are you sure, shocked. But it's not more of in the space of really asking the woman, because in his mind, he's really asking himself, are you sure? Like, are we sure we ready for this? Are we sure this is something that I can do and be a father and step into this space? And maybe depending on how your childhood was, it was either, am I going to be a better father than what I had, or am I going to be this, can I live up to what my father was? And there's always these different expectations. And this is something that as we're growing up, you don't really think of as when you're a boy, teenager, but when you get started to that young adult age and you're dating and you get out there, or maybe for me, I learned at a young age to grow up, that is this something that I'm prepared to step into? And when my first experience, like I mentioned, my son, when I found out, I stepped into it because I'm from South Carolina, the Bible Belt. So all we know is you take care of your child. That's something that happened. Abortion is never mentioned in churches. You don't see billboards. You don't see any of that. So when it came to that time, one of the first things she said was, I'm having this child. And I was like, okay, that's all I know. So I was like, that's fine. I'll be a father. So some men will have that approach too. Is like, that's fine. Like, that's what I wanted to do. That's all I know. But then you have these other men, the woman was to make the decision to have the abortion. Like, there's nothing you can do. And they're like, well, I have no choice over your body. But then this is kind of goes back to what you said about not speaking up. And that was the opportunity to be there, to be the protector. And that's something I consistently say to myself before you even told that story today of, I felt like I wasn't the provider or protector that I should have been when that decision was made. So that's something with men having to go into that and also think about their role in the abortion. A lot of men, I feel like, may not want to say they have a role. They may not want to accept that they had a role because that makes it harder. That makes it feel more real. That makes it feel like I actually had a part in this, and that there's something that I have a reason to be upset about. And we don't want to be upset about anything. We want to live a happy life. We want to be able to have these good days. We want to go watch our sports teams. We want to go hang out with our guy friends. It's just we want to do all these things, but then we can't really do that when we feel like something's weighing us down. We don't know what it is because it's uncomfortable. It's like, as a man, we like being uncomfortable if it's something we're familiar with. But emotions, what we've had our whole lives, we're not comfortable with those. We're not comfortable sharing these things. So to really, I say all that just to be as a lot of men, when they do step into this space and they're trying to figure out who am I going to do, who am I going to be as a father? Another thing is, even after their abortion experiences, what was my role? Some of them say they didn't have a role. Some of them say I just supported her. Well, when she asked, what did you say? So I just say a lot of men, when it comes to, a lot of questions come up, but the biggest one I can say that stands out is initial response is, are you sure, or shocked?
Yeah. And so when they have that, are you sure? And some of them will lean in, Josh. You've seen this happen in the centers. You've seen certain men step, like, just like the phrase says, lean into what's going on with an interest, with an understanding. They don't have all the answers, but they're saying yes to the moment. Like, how do you, what do you think separates that person? I know you mentioned earlier, if they had the example of their own of a father, but what else might be in that equation that helps that man to lean in and support her definitively, not with the kind of like, half-hearted, whatever you want, honey, like kind of thing, but the more steps into that, I'm here to help you.
A lot of it is in the center. So when we started talking with men, I would meet with them the day of the pregnancy test and giving them the information and giving them the ability to really just talk to someone privately in a room where they could get the information and the feedback they need, because a lot of guys never think about it. They don't know what they don't know. And when they get into a room and you're able to be there as an advocate and another man who has children and can reassure them, can walk them through what they're feeling, understand, to know, hey, it is scary, but you have a place. You can share those emotions. It does help. And I think when the men are treated inside the center and even in the church, when they can go to someone and get information and talk and get reassurance that it's okay to show your emotions. Because to Niles' point, I played football in college too, and guess what? You don't show emotion on the field that way, but you show emotion all the time. You're always emotional. You're jumping up and down. So this is a point where it was really the aspect of pointing out to men, you are a father. Your girlfriend just had a positive pregnancy. You're a dad. Now what are you going to do? Because now that's your child. How do you feel? And giving them the opportunity to say they're scared and to really pour out to you what's going on. I think the male advocates really do a job of making sure that the men are heard, because that's sometimes they're shot down at home. It's my body, my choice. Like, and then they go, okay, well, it's whatever she wants. And I'm like, no, you're the man. It's time for you to take that role as the head of the household, because now you do have a home. You have her and you have your child. So now stepping up as a man, and some take to that much easier than others.
The fight or flight kind of mentality, and so y- and I'm not trying to excuse men whatsoever. That's a
Yeah.
real psychological thing that we wrestle with. Of do I fight or do I flee? And so this is one of those areas where sadly too many men are too quick to flee the moment. Out of what we've talked about, some of that is actual selfishness. Like, let's also be upfront with that. There's a certain place where selfishness is a factor, not just for men but also for women. What they perceive ahead, the women are the quicker. I think the science shows us that to perceive the death of their future. It's like it's either the death of this child or the death of our future. Is kind of how it's couched in some of the studies from the early 2000s. But the nature of men is really one to say, well, it's not my problem. And some of that my body, my choice business has actually reinforced that concept of it's not my problem, it's her problem. This is her body, right? So she's got to make this decision. And of course, that puts us all on the complete wrong footing for that conversation. We really need to bring him back to the moment that, nope, this is your doing as well. That's what the science tells us. That's what the scripture tells us. That's what biology itself is all about. But this is one of those areas where when he leans in, now this is where men can help in the center. And Josh, you've been one of those counselors in the center. You've seen that. What's the importance? Women can do this very well, but can touch another man's heart in a certain way, can challenge him maybe in a certain way that women can't. Talk about being a men's counselor in the center and how that really changed the dynamic.
Yeah, as a men's counselor, the biggest thing is your transparency. It's allowing them to talk to them and be real. You know, when I first became a dad, it was scary. Um, Michelle already had Allie and Casey, and Allie was 11. I was going to walk in as stepdad, so I had no clue what I was doing. I was a 28-year-old rodeo cowboy. I had no clue what it was like to be a father with a family and do those things. So it was very difficult, and it was being transparent that I was scared. I know you're scared. I'm telling you my experience. So what I found was the transparency that men come into the room with really affects that young man's decision on how he's going to move forward. Because if you're just there saying, oh, the Bible says this, and this says this, and this says this, and this, they're lost. It's really about the connection of the man and the man in the moment. So as a men's volunteer, you're in there trying to show them, I'm just like you. I had doubts. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't make enough money. Everything you're feeling right now, I felt when I became a dad. And it doesn't matter how old your kids get, you still will have that feeling that, did you do a good job? My daughters are 37. Did they do a good job? My grandkids come to me. Am I doing a good job? And that's really what a guy wants to know when he's sitting in that room is, how do I move from where I am now to where I need to be? And I think
do a good job. Yeah.
It's really showing them who you are and not trying to sugarcoat it. It's going to be difficult. There's things you don't know how to do. Like I had no clue how to swaddle a baby. Guys don't learn that stuff.
I remember
how to burp a baby. I'm like, yeah, let's burp. No, you got to. So, but teach, sharing with them, I didn't know that stuff either, but we can teach that to you. Those are skills you can learn. Like everything else, you learned how to tune up a car. You learned how to play football. You learned how to, use AI. You can learn how to put on a diaper. You can learn how to, warm up a bottle. Those things are skills you can learn, and just being reassuring and being there for them.
Excellent. Nyles, was that your experience too when you first had your child?
Oh, so yes, I was going to say, I remember my first time had my son, and it was kind of like I was spending time with him, and they was like, gave him to me, and I was just like, I don't know how to hold him. I started holding him like a football. I was like, or I was like 10 and 2, like a car. I was like, how do you do this? Because then they were like, be careful with his head. They were like, it's still kind of soft. I was like, what do you mean soft? Is that normal? His first night, I actually stayed with him through the night after he was born. I actually stayed with she was my partner at the time, but that first night I stayed with him. And I think the whole night I was just scared. I was like scared to touch him and hold him. I was acting like he was made a stick of dynamite. And then now that he's older, I think about those moments. It's like now I feel like he's indestructible now. I feel like he just does whatever he wants, throws himself around the room. And it's like those moments kind of just made me think, like, I remember when I first had you, I didn't know what to do or like how to even, like, I was just thinking about everything down the line. Like, if I can't even hold him, how am I supposed to change a diaper or give him a bath? And I feel like some men also deal with those thoughts as well. And just, they start panicking before they even get to give themselves a chance to learn.
That's a good word, Nyles. That there really is a panic, no matter what they're showing on their faces. There's that bit of scared, as Josh said earlier, which really is a panic of sorts of not really knowing what to do next, and that doesn't help the man step up and lean in like we want him to. So that's one of the reasons why it's good to be there in that moment, invite them into that conversation as it's appropriate. But let's talk about the men on the other side of this equation that have said. That didn't lean in, that went through that abortion decision. When do you see that really that healing begin to take hold? Like, what is the evidence of when it starts to be real and kind of heart reality versus kind of head reality?
So I think the part of it is where it becomes real is just certain triggers that may be more apparent. So I think for those men that after their experience, they realize that before they started their healing journey and they've been maybe 5 or 10 years down the line. So Father's Day may have been very hard for them, or maybe being Christmas may be something difficult because sometimes when you were a child, you had these holidays or there's a lot of kids around your family in Christmas. But then as they go into those holidays before their healing and they realize something's not right. Why am I on Christmas or Thanksgiving? Why am I sad? Why do I feel uncomfortable? Why do I feel like everything is going on and I just feel stuck? And they start to realize these things. They try to talk about it, but they don't know the words to put with it. But then it becomes apparent, and I can go back to a recent experience I had in a group I actually facilitated with a man. He's been on his healing journey for about 18 months, and it was actually on our new resource. It was part of the words of Finding Solid Ground. It's a faith-based resource that we have. And it was my first group and the first time ever doing this resource. And he told me this was one of the best parts of his healing journey. He's been on his healing journey for about 18 months. But he said the difference that this showed is he was like, I've been able to give my child a name. I've been able to make a life for my child that I felt like I lost. I feel like I'm actually able to talk about a lot of these things that I haven't been able to share with anyone else, even though it's only been 18 months, but he's done it with talk to different people. But when we were going through Finding Solid Ground, he really felt like all of the triggers before were so minimal. Instead of them being triggers, they became lessons. They became reminders. And he used that word of those were reminders of how I approach others. And it's even led him to want to facilitate groups and certain things himself. So I think the biggest thing I can say is when you see the difference in a man is when he talks about the things in the beginning that were so hard for him, when he talks about them in the slightest sense, he's like, oh, that's nothing now. Like, I've grown from it so much now. You know how we are as men. We may have had something that was hurting us or really beating us down at one point, but then we would think back to it, we were like, yeah, I needed that at that moment, but now I'm fine. Like, if that tried to happen again or that moment happened again, I'd dominate. I'd handle it perfectly.
Yeah, and that's the evidence of when it's really taking root in his heart. We know that healing is always a journey, right? There's like it's like layers of an onion. We know that's the work of the Holy Spirit will continue on into the future. Sometimes there's opportunities to step back and to really um, reconcile some of those things. If nothing else, we do it in a spiritual sense, right? I appreciate the naming of the child. I know for us in the program I was involved in when I was in the center, we had a kind of a victory party, and it's really it's victory over that moment. It was a celebration of in a remembrance. So up to that point, it's mostly hurt and it's mostly pain, but at some point that transitions into a celebration of the gift that God had given, even for that short moment, and the gift of healing, in that way, then the memorializing that child. So, and this is in South Florida, we had some men who would do things. We would go to the beach, and I can't do that now because I'm in Ohio, and the beach is like 500 miles away. But when we were in Fort Lauderdale, we would see men would go to they would write a letter to their child. They would then do something as a memorial, and I've watched men basically who took items and that cast them into the water. Like they took a small glove and a bat, because they are memorializing the moment that they missed with that child of being able to play ball with them. I've heard of someone who actually crafted a flute, like a recorder type thing. They actually did it with their own hands, and then this was in the mountains when I was in Colorado. They actually took it, played Amazing Grace at the top of a mountain, and then buried that flute there in honor of their child. And so they transitioned from that hurtful season to a point of being able to celebrate that life and realize, like, look, that there is this reality of heaven. There is this understanding we'll be reunited. There is this moment of deeply memorializing that. To me, like, that was just so amazing to see men be able to do that, particularly, and that was the very obvious evidence that they had traveled quite a journey. So let's talk about men's identity. Because since we're talking about Father's Day, we're talking about, day, we don't do like the men, like the women, we don't have brunch, right? We go to the grill, we get the meat out, right? We do different things. So there's this whole thing about an identity as a father. Josh, talk about really that connection of helping men understand their place as a father, whether their child lived to that moment or did not.
Yeah, I think it's for their identity as a father to understand that regardless of the decision they made, and I've dealt with some guys who are on their second, who've had abortions come in. You're a father as soon as that child is created, and that's something you have to step into fatherhood and learn about. And we used to go through a lot of classes with them, and they would always ask, like, what should I do? What do I need to read? How do I need to move forward? Because up until the baby's born, they're that, well, I'm going to be a dad. And then once the baby's born, or not, I'm a father. So we read a lot of books about Fathered by God and used that program a lot to teach them how to become fathers and what does that look like, and how to step into that identity of, I am your father and I'm here. There's a certain kind of role that we play in a child's life, and that is that protector, that encourager, teaching them certain skills that we want them to know. My pastor now has 4 boys, and I feel bad for him because they're tiny and they're growing, but he's outnumbered by them. And he's like, how do I? And it's very simple. There's things the boys want to learn: how to fish, how to ride a bike, how to do. And at different stages, you have different jobs with those kids at different times in their life. And all the way growing up, my son is 32 years old. I have a different role at 32 than I had at 3.
Let me give you a quick story from my own fatherhood, and then we'll close this out. But I remember, and my oldest, who's now 37, but he was 3 years old, and he was in a bathtub with 3 inches of water, and I managed to leave the bathroom for, like, I don't know, maybe 45 seconds, maybe it was 60 seconds. It wasn't long, but I came back and there was water everywhere in the bathroom. Like, that 3 inches was now like 1.5 inches, and it was everywhere in the room. And I looked around at all the water, and I said, Jared, I said, how did all this water get all over the walls? And he said, I don't know. And it's as you know, that's probably a good answer at a certain point. But that was in that moment, self-aware, and I was like, I realized, like, oh, I do that myself. I do that to God. I sometimes, like, look around at the mess that I've made and said, I didn't know how that happened. And I learned in that moment I need to be much more self-aware when I'm approaching God. But something I learned really, marriage teaches you about yourself. But children teach you about the Father. So no matter how we encounter them, whether it's in that brief moment in an unplanned pregnancy, or it's in the birth and whatnot, that both of you have talked about, like that we learn more ourselves about our Father in heaven, because of how we understand our own relationship with our children. And so I appreciate you guys, gentlemen. Thank you for being a part of this. We're grateful for an opportunity to have a special Father's Day issue. We ask that you please subscribe to Pregnancy Help Podcast. Thank you for listening. And of course, happy Father's Day.